I'm Maria Wilson.
And I'm Danielle Mandikian.
And we are scientists. We love science.
Yeah, we do. So when we aren't doing it, the next best thing is to talk about science. And what's really awesome is that we're surrounded by some of the most brilliant minds in research.
We're going to step away from the labs today to talk to other scientists about the cool stuff they are thinking about, working on, and imagining.
As well as how some of these discoveries just might lead to new medicines. So grab your favorite drink, get ready to unlock your science brain, and join us for Two Scientists Walk Into a Bar.
The show for scientists, science geeks, and the people who love them.
What comes to mind when I say lab of the future?
Lab of the future. I think it'll be a more fun and interesting place to experiment. I think ideally for experiments that have really well-established protocols. You know, you can click a button and automation will do it for you. And then we can focus less on these like manual and routine walkthroughs and more on thinking about and executing on unique experiments that only we are equipped to do versus the machines.
Shiny.
More automation.
I want RFID benches to track where compounds are.
Can watch a fully grown system from tiny cell all the way up to medicine. Fully automatic.
You know, people have really big ideas, and most of them we cannot do because you need an army of like scientists to do all of that. And you know, at least the hypothesis is with like automating a lot of like the hard parts. Maybe we are enabled to do like, you know, combinatorial screens. We'll see. It's hard work to get there.
The lab in the future will allow us to get to scales that we cannot do right now. And that means not just the throughput, but less mistakes, less errors that are introduced, more standardization, and that will help us unlock a next step.
Hi everyone, welcome to Two Scientists Walk Into a Bar. I'm your host, Danielle Mandikian. And I gotta say, I am over the moon about today's episode. Because last season, we asked everyone about AI, and most of the perspectives were on data science. But at the end of the season, we had another guest, Aviv, who went further and gave us a bit of a teaser about how things are actually going to change in the lab. So we decided for this season to dedicate a whole episode on what the lab of the future could actually look like. Now, as an often burnout lab scientist myself, I'm absolutely ready for this. So in order to bring us all into the lab of the future, we've invited two special experts, Margaret Porter Scott and Andy Lash. Welcome to the bar.
Nice to be here.
Yeah.
Let's get into it. So out the gate, lab of the future. What is the visual or song that you hear in your head? I'm a Futurama girl, so I see the guy walking him out of the cryo chamber.
Yeah, I think it definitely has that sort of 1950s sort of, what the future will be, sort of Jetsons-esque.
Lost in space.
Yeah.
Okay, all right. So from y'all's perspectives, thinking about lab in the future, what do you see as some of the bottlenecks that we absolutely need to just deal with?
I would say a lot of it is around fragmentation. So today, while, scientists exist in a drug discovery process that is integrated across a lot of labs and a lot of disciplines, we use a lot of separate software, a lot of separate automation systems that today are not very uniformly connected to one another. And our future lab, I think, will have fully integrated and connected processes where things will flow a lot more smoothly.
Yeah, so when we think about lab automation in a pharma setting, so first there's the whole world of industrial automation like we do in manufacturing. And that world is totally different, right? You want to make sure that every dose of XYZ drug is precisely the same as every other dose. So, those systems, the way they're programmed, they're kind of designed to be inflexible by their nature. And a change to that line is a really big deal. And that's not how it is for the stuff we do, right? So we're really talking about lab automation in a research context. And in a research context, you need flexibility. And there's a whole cottage industry of tooling to be able to do this, and software that lets you kind of reconfigure this stuff. And I think for me, as someone with like a more traditional software engineering background, not like coming at it from a life sciences background, the way this software works is like quirky and weird. The way you program these systems I think they're intended to be easier to program, but I think the kind of reality of the way they approach this makes it like very different than how you program other things. And because of that, the like easier to program stuff actually ends up being this hyper specialized skill, and making changes is slow. And I just generally think that sort of lab automation software being this like special quirky thing is ultimately going to go away, and it'll be just much more like how we approach any software engineering things. And a lot of the sort of software engineering best practices like automated tests or version control, which are like broadly not used in lab automation, will be. And so then once that happens, I think that'll make it like a lot more accessible to folks.
Yeah. I mean, one of the things I've been reflecting on a lot is how I'm really excited about the way AI can enter the scene at a lot of those interfaces and make them a lot smoother and faster for us. And what I think this will mean is that automation will maybe finally reach its potential. Because I think when we've thought about automation in the past, we thought of like fully autonomous processes, and we sort of, have seen these, things in action and assumed that they were working really smoothly. But a lot of times there are people on the back end trying to find bespoke solutions. There are lots of little disconnects. And a lot of times scientists are doing things that are really not all that intellectually stimulating or interesting or amazing, but just kind of like kludgy copy pasting, making connections or waiting for vendors, those kind of things. And so, my belief, and I think what, a lot of people are going to be working really hard on, is to get AI systems that can just fill those little gaps.
I mean, that's really like a thing too. And sometimes we don't talk about the tax of this, but like when you're the person at the bench, there's like a mental cost from like, and I don't know if this is just the way my brain functions or the people I know, but you have to like switch topics and you get really into it, and then having to stop and stall and do some of those kind of like clerical things, really trying to do this communication stuff really interrupts the creative process.
It's a great point.
It's a really big problem sometimes. Yeah.
Yeah, and I've reflected on that. Like, it's probably not what you and others went to school for, was to like, fix a clog.
Yeah.
Download data onto a...
Or why can't I get the math to math, right, on certain things, and you think that you transfer it to one system, it should be easy. So that's actually something I wanted to ask y'all about, like, what are things that you think might help this kind of integration between two worlds?
I think the challenge there is when you have these different backgrounds, you need to develop some trust, because trust is this sort of magic currency that makes great teams great. And so, I think like a piece of that is being able to, on the software side, when we're building stuff with scientists, that we can bring them along, produce stuff that's useful, but then also, it's sort of trying to solve some of our broader goals in the area. I know, I think for a lot of times when we're building a system that maybe has like a UI component that a scientist needs to interact with, in like the back of my mind, the real goal is get good, clean data to do data science on like later. But in order to get someone, you often need to kind of get data out of people's heads. And since we can't yet do that in a magical way, right? Sort of we have to get them to enter stuff. And so then I think the trick is how can you make the software easy enough to use, or not just be easy to use, but also give something back to the scientists, like save them time in some way. So it's not just the like enter metadata tags. It's like, oh, this is helping me. It's providing a calendar of what I need to do, or it tees up the next step, or like however that system solves the problem. That's like a big piece of it.
Mm-hmm. And I think on the side of the experimental scientists, I think we need to be able to abstract one level from what we're doing. So rather than say, we need to measure, this antibody for this project and this solution for this reason, using these reagents, we need to say something like, we need to move liquid from, these tubes into these tubes, dilute it in these ways. And we also need to be able to bring that into the paradigm of other things that are similar.
How do y'all see that future looking like for like bench scientists and also from like the computational side?
So, unless you've been living under a rock, you're aware that AI has like grown by leaps and bounds over the last several years. And also just in general, like if you played with ChatGPT when it came out and then haven't really touched it in a while, all of your opinions about it are so wildly out of date. It's really changed a lot in the last year. And one of the things that it has gotten much better at is writing code for you. And I would say in something like November of the past year, it got generationally better again. And I can now see that a lot of the software engineering we'll be doing going forward will really be like written by AI. So that's crazy. So like, then when I think about this, so what's that going to mean for automation? Because like automation, or the lab automation, like I was describing before, is like just has this like weird environment. But if it was more like software engineering, then you could imagine getting these like potentially huge gains from, the same AI-assisted coding stuff happening here. There's a ton of lab automation that doesn't happen today because some scientist rightly concludes that like the effort in terms of setting the whole thing up is like not gonna save them time because they're not doing a repetitive process, or they're only repeating it once, or whatever it is. So if we like greatly lower the activation energy, then I mostly just think we'll see lots more of it.
I appreciate that you put that in a biochemist framework, lowering the activation energy. I just want you to know I picked up what you put down.
Delta G.
So just to make sure I'm like getting this, like you see like how even for like people in the software engineering space, the AI is going to be helping them shift over like some of the just nitty gritty of the coding by assisting them, and that might help them envision how to put everything together in a more, I don't even know the right word for it, but like way to make it easier to apply to multiple systems or something.
When you're using these tools and when they're working well, you're really operating at a much higher level. You're really describing much more what you want and the kind of broader software architecture of how you want it to be in the framework, but you're not saying write the code this way. I mean, it's really different. It's not, again, if you like played with the previous generation of tools and it was sort of like autocomplete and you like wanted to write this function and it like writes a function for you, it's like it's not that anymore. Now it's you write these like long detailed prompts and then it goes off for 20 minutes and writes like a large amount of code. So
frees you up to be a conductor.
Yeah, frees you up to be a conductor is the, and I'm like, I like, my instinct is to try to like insert more tentative language here because, I just feel like every day we're learning a little bit more. And it's not, these tools are not, they can still be like drive you crazy. They get like stuck in ruts, but also like Oh my gosh, just the last less than half a year, the changes have been crazy. So I think we'll see a lot of that, and I think that will start to have a significant effect on lab automation if we can get there.
How do you see this like changing the role of folks in your world?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think one thing it may do is really allow them to increase their productivity in a very satisfying way. I mean, if you think about what it takes to make a medicine, it's the confluence of several miracles. You have to be potent and selective and safe. You have to be, on a correct therapeutic hypothesis, which you may not know till you get to the clinic. So there's so many things that we have to do and test to make medicine that if we can improve our productivity, we could, make more medicine for more unmet need. And we're not out of ideas, nor is the world out of unmet medical need. So what that might look like in a tangible sense is rather than if we use AI for what I think it might be good for. So for example, to program a robot. Right now, we need specialists for some automation to program it. And if you want to do something different tomorrow than what you did today, you need to call on that specialist again. So, I mean, what's AI good at? It's pretty good at translating one thing into another. So it can translate a human protocol into an automation protocol. I mean, we can do that, already today in some ways. And I think, this is what's going to, as Andy's mentioning, this is going to get more and more sophisticated and really speed up. So now, our scientists don't have to spend time on, as much time on programming and planning their automation runs. They also, in terms of errors, people are spending a lot of time babysitting automation and, waiting to see, is a plate going to be dropped? Is there going to be a clog? Is there going to be a bubble? These kind of things. And so if AI can do what I think it can do really well in terms of pattern recognition and, detect these things, maybe even eventually correct them without somebody having to babysit. Now, all of a sudden, maybe instead of doing one project, you can do two projects. And, because of what we know, because we know there's such a great need for additional medicines for unmet medical need, this is a boon for our scientists and ourselves to be able to just deliver more into the world.
Hi, Danielle.
Hey, Karen.
Hey, Danielle.
Hey, Wellington.
So tell me, what is AI really good at now at the lab bench?
So even though we've been talking about the future, if we just focus for now, I would say AI is really great at helping us dig through literature. And the other kind of thing that I think's been really helpful is helping to give different perspectives on how we might approach something.
You brought up the analogy of it freeing you up to be a conductor. What specifically does that mean for you at the bench?
To me, that means I'm still in charge of what science is happening, but I'm being able to point to different instruments, if you will, or different tools or assistants, however you want to frame it. But each of these kind of tasks that I could offload to AI are things that I'm still putting together for an overarching symphony or an overarching scientific goal, but I'm just kind of directing what needs to happen in order to bring it all together for the bigger picture. Okay, so kind of a weird question, but if I wanted to super duper distill this down, it seems like there's things y'all have to think about from theoretical, hardware, and software. How do y'all rank order where your power is going, your brain power is going towards these?
The hardware outside of the software sort of doesn't get you anywhere. Mm-hmm. So when you're thinking about automation, you kind of have to do a good job of both. I guess that's kind of how I'm thinking of it. But I mean, again, and maybe this is kind of playing off a little bit of what Margaret was saying, you do these things for a reason, right? We're not interested in just building cool automated processes that are cool, right? We want to do something that is gonna drive the science forward in some, meaningful way. And, I mean, that is the really cool part about being in this industry is this idea you could actually do something that would actually help people. And also there's a history of it working. Look at cancer in my lifetime, how it went from a death sentence in most cases to not in many cases. That's a huge change. So anyway, accelerating that seems a very worthwhile thing to do.
I agree with that vibe. What about you, Margaret?
Well, I think at the end of the day, it's not an either or. It's really, this is a partnership, right? I mean, just like no one's ever made a drug by themselves, I also think that this, kind of creation of the lab of the future is going to be a pretty tight partnership between, people who are good at software and automation and the scientists who know exactly what they need their experiments to deliver and how they should be done. So, I mean, I think that, but that's actually the joy of the whole thing is that, being smart with smart people, this is really, this is really one of the great joys of being a human on planet Earth. So I think that's part of the fact that it's not one or the other and that they're not sequenced, but that it's a partnership is probably the best part.
In terms of lab automation in the foreseeable future, what is the weirdest one that you're most excited about and why?
Right now, the way lab automation works is it's like industrial robots, right? Like a car factory. And everything, it's all based in absolute positioning in 3D space. And so, the sensors aren't being used. Now, we're now seeing, actually on the way here, Margaret and I were chatting about her, the latest generation of the most standard robotic arm we use in lab automation has an integrated camera, and it will adjust itself and self-teach positions in 3D space. So that's already, that's already happening. I think on the humanoid robots side, to me, the implication is that they have more sensors, more decision making. Their humanness, I think, is a bit up for debate. For example, wheels seem better than legs.
100%, yeah.
But
wheels seem better than what?
Legs.
Oh yeah. I agree.
But also, I think some of the reason why they want to make robots more like humans is actually to make it easier to make the robots, because then so LLMs are amazing and magic and they work because you gave them all the text in the world, right? Mm-hmm. So where would you get a similarly sized training set for robots?
I see.
Okay? So if they're shaped like humans, you can teleoperate them, which means you're in a VR headset, and then you do actions and the robot mimics your actions, and you do that enough over time that it can learn those actions. And so that's a way to get training data. Someone else was telling me there's research right now into can you use basically YouTube videos as a way to teach humanoid robots?
That was the first thing that came to mind when you were saying
how
that.
to be humans.
Yeah.
I don't actually know where that has gone and how effective that is, but I think that's sort of another reason why sort of the humanoid shape is interesting. But for us, I think you could see robots like that to try to move things between disconnected stations. That's one sort of obvious use case. Another case is some of the things we do happen at volumes that just your traditional lab automation is not good at.
Tiny volumes?
Yeah, the traditional lab, no, it's mostly bigger.
Oh,
so
okay.
Traditional lab automation is oriented around these rectangular plates.
SBS format.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And but we do some stuff in 5-liter flasks, or I'm not even sure what those bags are called.
Bags.
Yeah, wave bags. They're
40 liters.
Yeah, so they're hard to use, right? And even just picking one of those up is a classically hard problem for a machine, because the weight moves as you're holding it.
Yeah.
But if we could solve that, that would be great, because otherwise that's all just sort of, there's a lot of drudge work in maintaining that kind of stuff. So I think something will happen there. But I'm envisioning these robots, it's much more like they are autonomous, or at least autonomous to some degree, right? And if you just imagine to get a robot to do something, there's many little motors that have to fire. And so if you're one version is you explain the detailed steps of how to do that, but I think those days are over. I think now it's more you're explaining the task and it figures out the details. Yeah. So to what extent that gets used in labs or not, I guess we could talk.
So I want to add to what you were saying, Andy, that, I think, humans are probably going to continue to do the job of humans, but what may be interesting is that our labs will be, we'll have the opportunity to reconfigure our labs so that they are on the scale that the scientists and the automation needs to really function well. And so as scientists are, reviewing data and designing new experiments, they may not actually need to get in there with their own body and hands to do the work. We may be able to optimize the way the labs are configured to run autonomously. This is what we can really be excited about, which is that we can be more productive. We can even explore, some of the lower, the kind of higher risk, higher reward hypotheses that we haven't had the time and resources to do may come in scope if we have a lot of automation that was exploring, let's say, hypothesis A. Now maybe because we have more time freed up from the excellent automation, we could maybe also explore hypothesis B, and once in a while those are going to pay off, and those are going to be the real transformative therapies.
I don't think there's a scientist out there that doesn't hit real for, right? I mean, seriously. But the cool thing is that even though y'all are coming from such different worlds, really what you're talking about is, again, this idea of like having all of this extra automation frees up the scientists to explore more and conduct higher theory projects, which is what we all want.
Danielle, what's your weird prediction? Are aliens involved?
Well, ancient astronaut theorists would suggest that they've already been involved, Karen. I don't know. I feel like my weird prediction would be that instead of us always focusing on, the way that we're trained to have like a very defined, small, incremental question, we're able to orchestrate much larger questions and get to bigger picture answers much faster. So not that weird. It's kind of like our goal.
Describe for us what you do in a day and how you would leverage, this lab of the future to be more creative.
So I'm a wet lab scientist, and I really try to understand where therapies distribute in a living organism, what's the biology and chemistry behind that. And as focused as that might sound, it actually means that the types of techniques and lab-based experiments that I do are actually very diverse. And some of them are kind of dangerous. Like, I was joking with someone, like, I can't wait for the lab of the future to come handle all my liquids because I'm always terrified I'm going to get osmium on my skin. And like, when I think of lab of the future and what it would do to take care of things, I could offload some of these really tedious, experimental things where I'm at the bench for hours manipulating things slowly and incrementally, having a robot do that so I could then think about the biology behind it and where I'd want to go afterwards.
I also want to talk directly to the young scientists out there. I think as we're able to get a lot of the mundane jobs in the lab done in the future, and the repetitive things, all the silly copy-paste things done by AI and automation, this will really make a lot of space for innovation. We may be able to do higher risk experimentation than we've been able to do in the past because we just have that much more productivity at our fingertips with the same amount of resources.
Something that comes to my mind is the need for software in this biological context is so high, and we've been never able to even come close to meeting the need. That the thing that's like most appealing to me is if we imagine that we're giving, each software engineer this science fiction power suit that makes them 5 times stronger, right? What I see is we're going to then be doing 5 times more, and maybe then we'll catch up to where the actual needs are.
Yeah, because the work is waiting, right? I mean, if we look at the needs that we have in informatics and software to support lab operations, I mean, at our current rate, you'd never get it done. So it'll be great to have an AI assist on that.
with this really fast-changing technology, what do you think scientists need to do to change their perspective or their skill sets to really stay relevant and integrate fully into this like crazy freeway of change?
It's like a whole new world. It seems like so many things are changing. And the opportunity there is there's very few experts because all of this stuff is so new. So, dive in, become an expert. I think if your mode is like, these tools don't affect me, then you're probably setting yourself up for a tough future. But if instead you're like, oh, these tools, make me better and I'm extremely good at using them, then I just think that those are the people we'll need in the future.
I think it's imagination, right? Because we've been in one paradigm for actually quite a while. I saw the first automation land in the mid 90s and things haven't changed that much since then, but I think they're about to change pretty quickly. And so what the challenge before us that I think is great is to be able to think, much more broadly about what, each scientist can do, what we can accomplish, how we can do things in new ways. There's a real unlock about how we're practicing science in the lab that's, I think about to happen. And so the way to ready for it is to think about what would I do if I could? How could I make a bigger impact? What other ideas, do I have? And I think those are the kinds of things that I would really encourage people to, start imagining to be ready for the moment.
Yeah. So kind of a funny question close to this came from my co-host Maria. And she was telling me that she remembers when molecular biology was a lot like cooking, like there were tons of buffer recipes and they were super finicky. She spent a lot of time wasting, like weighing things out, pHing them perfectly, autoclaving them when necessary. And then she remembers when like the DNA prep kits started coming out and like precast gels and stuff like that. So she wanted me to ask y'all, in the lab of the future, do you think molecular biologists will still need to know how to pipette or will they need to develop a totally different skill set? That's the dream, right? Screw carpal tunnel.
Well, yeah, I do think, and in real life, repetitive stress injuries, I think, are something that we could hopefully put in the rearview mirror for sure. To be honest with you, I think, today, molecular biologists already do a lot of things with automation, but so they're probably more in the space of getting stuck on, what are those few manual steps, either on the data side or on the automation side that they need to do. And I think those are the kinds of things that could probably, get evolved even further.
I think that's like really good news. Like I've known in my lifetime, more scientists than I can count on a hand who have actually had their careers ended because they got such severe carpal tunnel that they couldn't do this. And now, like as things are transitioning, it opens them up to be able to do so many more things they wouldn't have been able to do.
Yeah.
Right? I think that's something that sometimes we ignore or we don't realize how prevalent it actually is. Yeah.
So Danielle, when you mentioned repetitive stress injuries, I quickly got my phone out and did a little search, and it turns out there are studies that show that between scientists and laboratory workers, up to 77% of scientists suffer from work-related injuries.
Yeah, I think sometimes when people think about scientists, they think about someone, lost in the books, really thinking deeply about stuff, but it's actually quite physical and very tedious. And so when I'm training like early in career scientists, part of what we have to go through is just building up the tolerance to be able to manipulate, fine-tune motor type skills for hours on end where you're not actually spending that time thinking deeply. Just imagine if we were able to offload and automate some of these mechanical, tedious tasks, how much more time we could spend on real fundamental questions that drive the science versus just getting it done. We've talked a lot about what this could look like in theory, but can you all give me like a concrete example of something that's already there or that you think the field is currently working on and is like going to be achievable soon?
So what we've been able to do recently and have some really nice proof of concepts are on having AI program automation to do the exact protocol that scientists want to do. And we have this in, little mini bite-sized versions now, and this is going to be able to be something that we're going to be able to do, I think, better and more easily. So the way that scientists are struggling to program automation, I think that's, I think it's pretty much a breakthrough to be able to have AI do that for folks.
And not have to go to some highly specialized person
who doesn't have enough time.
Right. Yeah. So, I think that just lowers the bar and makes this stuff a lot more available to people.
Yeah. Being able to kind of democratize automation, the programming of sophisticated automation, I think that's a breakthrough that is, just beginning to start to roll through. I'm excited about it.
That's one of my favorite things that I've heard people talking about is as new technologies are developing, democratizing that for other scientists is I feel fundamentally important as a scientist, and it's great to see that these tools also enable that.
Right.
Okay. So this has been a lot of fun. I got to ask before I let y'all go, what is the thing you're most excited about in your work and in your field?
For me, it's just this sense of here I've had this decades-long career in software engineering, and suddenly we're in this time period where a week is what 2 months used to feel like. So that part is crazy and interesting and exhilarating and scary and all of those things. The way in which we want to harness it is to, do more discoveries faster. And I think if we are doing way more experiments, which is the implication of doing a better job with automation, then we will get more insights faster. And when we get more insights faster, we will invent new drugs faster. And that's ultimately what we're here to do.
And if we can invent them, faster and, more of them in parallel, we also have the potential to reduce the cost of making drugs, which I think could be really exciting. I think similarly, after many decades working with automation, I think it's really about to deliver its promise of really supporting the scientists and really being walkaway. Really completing their experiment either without errors or being able to figure out its own errors and, correct them without somebody having to drive back in and move things around. So I think we're about to see it really start to work.
I think for every scientist who ever had to take a nap in lab,
yeah,
thank you. This has been really wonderful. It's been so nice to meet y'all. This has been fun. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Great episode. You started the show talking about Futurama, though. If you could jump in a cryo chamber and wake up in a lab 100 years from now, what is the one thing you hope hasn't changed about being a scientist?
Access to coffee, full stop. More seriously, I would say it's the back and forth kind of arguments that we have. I know y'all know I'm a peach, but my favorite thing is actually arguing with other scientists and figuring out new ideas and new directions to go. And so I think that even as we automate things, bring in AI out the wazoo, that's still going to be a core part of being a scientist over coffee.
What's one crazy experiment you would have done that you didn't do or failed at or thought it was too impossible or it just took too much time?
I think I would have done a lot more in neuronal signaling mapping, where I would have much more accurate patches into much more complex, larger organotypic cultures and kind of done more at a system-to-system communication aspect. What's really crazy to me are that the new scientists entering into the workforce now are going to have so many more tools that are going to be available, and they're going to be able to modify and grow with them so much faster. I cannot wait to see what happens. And that's our show. Thanks so much for listening. If you haven't already, rate our podcast wherever you listen. It'll help new people find us. And make sure to subscribe. If you have any questions about the show, you can contact us at podcast@gene.com. And now for me, it's back to stocking cells.